Vision 9:25-24. Famine equals deprivation, then starvation. This day in a vision, I saw thousands of people who were obviously in famine. Many of them were destitute of hope and full of the sufferings that come of famine. It became obvious by the condition of the people that multitudes were suffering deprivation, and many had advanced to the level of starvation. I saw bodies lying in heaps as people had died and there was none to bury them. Their bodies were rotting and, of course, putting forth the odor of death, which was almost unbearable. I asked the Lord why these people were in such conditions, as it was made plain to me that such ones were not just in one locality or nation. The Lord said that some of the famine conditions were brought about by demon-directed bureaucrats who wanted to control what farmers could and could not grow. However, these bureaucrats knew nothing about farming and they only wanted to exercise their authority over the farmers. Consequently, he stated that many of the farmers had stopped farming because they refused to be controlled by these proud fools who were political puppets. Then I was shown that in other places the land was dry and parched, with nothing growing at all, and the area was full of dead animals and birds as well as people. The once abundant rivers and streams were reduced to the size of ditches and were muddy and ugly. Nothing was flowing, and what stagnant water there was provided nothing for growth or sustenance of life. The polluted waters that remained were full of disease and were breeding grounds for death-carrying insects. After seeing these things, I asked the Lord why. He answered me plainly and told me that people have shut him out of their lives and refused to repent. So he said that he had shut up the waters of heaven from coming down, and because they chose death above life in him, he was sending them death by starvation. He likewise said that the people who were dying by starvation were a depiction of what evil leaders in the churches were doing to his people. He said these leaders were refusing to give the people the true word and were feeding them with lies and pretension. He likewise said that the religious leaders were like the proud bureaucrats who wanted to control his spirit, and because of that, most of the true shepherds had resigned because they refused to be controlled by bureaucrats. He further told me that there would actually be vast numbers of people who would die by starvation, and some of those would be in nations that were once so abundant that they had huge stocks of food that they could have kept millions alive. Now, he said these nations were so far in debt and had no stockpiles of anything except weapons for death and endless vials of. He said that many of the were appetite-suppressing drugs that were invented for times of food shortages. However, in many persons, those doses were deadly, and once they received those who were susceptible literally starved to death in 5 to 7 days. By this time, I was very sad, and as I cried out for these ones, out of compassion, the Lord told me not to pray for them, because he said that those who were appointed to death by starvation would be taken down in agony and painful hunger. He said that some would try, like I did, to pray for them. Others would try to alleviate the ravaging hunger by overfeeding them and causing their hearts to fail from the weakened conditions they were in. Then he told me not to meddle in his justice, but to accept what he was showing me and realize that in bringing down the proud among them would be some who had been rich and famous. He said that by their riches they could not be spared, and that he wanted the buzzards to clean their skeletal remains of flesh. He further said that because these had sown to their flesh, they would reap corruption, unable to spare themselves from the starvation that would destroy their lives. He said that because endless peoples, tribes, and nations had refused salvation through Jesus Christ, they would receive starvation. He said that after their bones were picked clean, they would try and be blown to the wind, for their lives were worthless. After he stopped speaking to me, I saw over and over buzzards circling in many parts of the world, and he gave me a whiff of the terrible stench of death. Then he said, I have given them what they wanted, and now their souls are in hell. He said they chose for death, and I chose the means by which they died, and it was a most wretched, miserable way to go.